It was a daring plot to escape from the legendary federal penitentiary on Alcatraz. But could three audacious inmates in 1962 pull off the heady plan? For it to work, they would have to use their heads. Three fake ones made of cement and paint. The Dummies of Alcatraz. This is their story. They called it America's Devil's Island, the Rock, Alcatraz. And it was hell. In 1934, J. Edgar Hoover turned the island of Alcatraz, a mile off the coast of San Francisco, from an abandoned military fort into a prison to house America's incorrigibles. 18 hours a day, the inmates spent trapped in their 5x9 cells. The only time they got out was to eat and to work. Everyone assumed that Alcatraz was escape-proof. A few brave souls had tried to break out over the years, 31 in all, but each failed, including 2 who were presumed drowned, their bodies never found. But that didn't deter John Anglin, his brother Clarence, and fellow bank robber Frank Morris from giving it their best shot. It didn't hurt that the Anglins were accomplished escape artists from Florida, and Morris had a genius-level IQ. In 1961, the men, all in their early 30s, began plotting their escape. Clarence had just arrived on the Rock. Frank and John had been there less than a year. Over the next 12 months, they fashioned spoons swiped from the mess into trowels and dug out around the steel air grates in their cells.
You could make a ice pick out of a spoon handle just by shaving it down. So that's a very good tool.
With art supplies, they made convincing-looking phony grates to cover up their work. But the prison itself was only the first obstacle. Once they broke out, they faced the treacherous waters and sharks of San Francisco Bay. Ingeniously, the Anglins and Morris crafted rafts from prison-issue raincoats.
Collecting about 15 raincoats and sewing these and gluing the seams and inflating these raincoats would give them a flotation device to kick across the bay.
Where did our convicts learn this? Certainly not in the Boy Scouts. The blueprints for the rafts came right out of a popular mechanics article titled, "Your Life Preserver, How Will It Behave When You Need It?" But the key to the whole escape was the cement heads. Every night, the guards religiously conducted head counts, peering inside each cell to make sure the inmates were all tucked in safe and sound. Rounds were at 8 p.m., 9:30, midnight, 3 a.m., and 5 a.m. The shifts were too close. The men would need more time if their escape plan was to work.
These guys were no dummies. The heads were very important because without those heads, they wouldn't make the bed checks.
So, the inmates went on a prison scavenger hunt. They scrounged most of the parts from an unlocked prison supply closet. And Clarence Anglin had a job at the prison barber shop, where he patiently collected real hair clippings for months. Assembled with cement and the hair on top, the first effort looked more pig-like than human. The would-be escapees dubbed him Oink. The next few efforts would prove to be much more lifelike. One trick, using electric wiring to shape the skull, worked nicely on Frank Morris's head. Another technique, molding rags and soap, worked splendidly for creating facial features on the dummy in Clarence Anglin's cell. Paint added the final touches. They dubbed the first of the new batch Oscar. Months in the making, the heads were ready, and so were the inmates. On June 11, 1962, around 11 p.m., Clarence, J.W., and Frank placed the dummy heads in their cots. They crawled through the grates in their cells, climbed up to the roof, and slithered down toward the water. A half hour after they'd made their break, the 3 men slipped their rafts into the bay. Back at the cell block, the guards counting heads went right ahead. As they walked past the cells of Clarence, J.W., and Frank, nothing appeared out of place, at least until morning. When the guards tried to rouse the 3 sleepyheads from their cells, they were treated to a shocking surprise. Over the next week and a half, the feds conducted an extensive search of land, sea, and air. The FBI said evidence found floating in the bay was proof enough that the men drowned. But the mystery remains. Did these plaster heads lead the men to freedom or death? A fellow prisoner claims the escapees talked about going to South America, and relatives admit to receiving several unsigned Christmas cards. After the breakout and investigation, the FBI took the dummy heads and the other evidence back to Washington. The men were presumed dead, even though no bodies were ever recovered. Unlike the escapees, the FBI did return the heads to Alcatraz, which in 1978 was no longer a prison, but a national park. They went on display until the damp conditions led to their deterioration. The Alcatraz escape heads are now under lock and key in a controlled environment at the San Francisco Maritime Museum. No one knows where the men are.